We're back.
We are back. Hello and welcome to today's edition of the Get Buyer Ready. Well, it's really the Get Buyer Ready show, isn't it?
Yes.
So great to have you here. My name is Drew Innes, the CEO of Hello House, and this is my...
founder of Hello House, Scott Agate. How are you guys?
Mate, we wouldn't be here without him, would we?
Well, it makes sense. I started the company.
Exactly. Exactly. We've all got a chair because of you. Fantastic. So, if you're tuning into our Get Buyer Ready show for the very first time, just a quick reminder, Hello House is Australia's only property negotiation as a service business. We work nationwide, helping everyday property buyers secure their dream home or investment, so they don't become an industry statistic going it alone.
Yeah, well, tell us about the statistics, because we're going to link this back to the 10 reasons why buyers miss out on their dream home or investment. But what are the horrible stats? Yeah,
they're horrendous. Okay, so I put a little post in saying you can't pretend to unknow something that you know is factually true.
There's a lot of no's there.
I know. Yeah. So just to put you in the picture, what we did was we got our chief analyst, Sam, to go and do a deep dive into the property and finance industry, because the finance industry informs the property industry. And so we asked him to go back and do a 5-decade deep dive into those industries and, report back as to, what are the major enhancements that have happened throughout that time period that have really helped buyers buy better. Yeah. And so what showed up was, I suppose the major breakthrough back in 1995 was when realestate.com.au first entered the market, and then Domain shortly thereafter. And so that was the first real breakthrough for any tools that came to market to help property buyers.
Yeah, it really streamlined the process to people, and it gave them information at their fingertips, which was never available before.
Correct. However, that said, it's still interesting today that not many people know how to truly use those tools to their full advantage.
Yeah,
right?
That's very true.
Yep. And so as we did this deep dive, we then sort of drilled down and said, well, okay, let's look at the last 10 years. 50 years is great, but what's really shown up in the last 10 years? And so we consulted with some really big names in the finance industry. And we said, you're one of the biggest names in Australia in the finance industry. Tell us a little bit about, your insights about what's happened in the finance industry as it relates to, property transacting. And again, not a lot has been changed to improve the business process. What we realised was that looking over a 10-year average, except for a skew in the numbers in the last sort of 12 to 18 months, only 72% of conditional approvals see the light of day and reach settlement. Just think about that for a moment.
It's a lot of wastage, isn't it?
A hell of a lot of wastage. And so if you want to know what that converts to financially, about $10 billion each month is left on the table. It never sees the light of day. And so $120 billion, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Is it a problem, or is it an opportunity to actually improve the way that buyers buy, reduce their days on market, and help the finance industry settle more of those loans and faster?
Well, it's an opportunity, but it's also a big giant black hole that no one talks about, or an elephant in the room. That's probably another way about it. It seems to be that talking to the main players in the finance game, that it's built into business, isn't it? It's a redundancy that is as long-term been there, and it's really nothing's been done to address that issue at mass. And that's what really drove us to create the Get Buyer Ready course, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we're sort of giving you a little bit of background here to give you context of why Get Buyer Ready even exists today. And so one of the things that we were really cautious of was, being that industry player that came out and said, the finance industry is broken, we've got a solution to it. We didn't want to be that person, and that's why we consulted with some of the biggest brains in the industry. And that was a bit like, mate, it's just it's sort of accepted. It's inbuilt redundancy. This is how it's been done forever and a day. But geez, wouldn't it be nice if we could claw back a little bit of that?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so,
what does it spit out then? So we talk about the statistics that come out of that finance industry, and also all the research we did talking to, and reviewing all the online surveys that have been done over the last decade or so in terms of buyer experiences through mortgage brokers, through finder.com or savings.com. There was lots of different industry studies. Realestate.com and Domain had done things as well. And what did it really print out at the end of that?
Okay, so what spat out of that deep dive was this, and it's it's pretty horrendous, the journey for the Australian property buyer. So 7 months on average to transact, spending over 90 hours, and you can call that either waste or investment, researching over 300 properties, usually then missing their first 5 transactions, being outplayed and out-negotiated by the selling agent, settling on the 6th usually as a compromise to what they set out to buy.
Or emotionally overpaying to stop the fight in that instance.
Well,
or both.
Mate, I was saving that to the end.
Yeah, that's not a very good start, that one.
Yeah. So, and 45% report having some sort of emotional level of feeling buyer remorse, after they're compromised and settled, and then we get to the financial. Like, the bottom line is, we think that every Australian property buyer going it alone without any level of education or expert representation is paying an emotional premium. So we're talking above retail, right, at the hand of the selling agent, because they're just simply not skilled at that agent game playing.
Yep.
They're not skilled.
And they're emotionally invested.
Heavily emotionally invested. Yep. And so, now that we had a clear picture of the sort of the statistics and the landscape of finance and property, we thought, well, what's the solution? And if you want to, if you think about the mission, the high 10,000 foot view mission of Hello House, it is to transform the way Australians buy property. And therefore, for us to achieve that goal, we've got to actually find ways to help property buyers buy smarter. Yeah, and you can't just do that with service alone. You have to do it through education and service combined. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Absolutely.
So this is a great background story on why Get Buy Ready even exists today, because when I came on board and I was working with Scott, he always used to talk about the buying process. And I'm like, man, define the buying process for me. And he would just automatically go, find, analyse, negotiate, transact. And so when you overlay find, analyse, negotiate, transact over the statistics,
it's pretty ugly.
You realise why education is a key part of helping Australians buy better. Because unless you lift your intellectual understanding of the buying process, you're always going to get caned.
And we can really pick it apart as well, and that's part of what we want to talk about today, is in each of those sections, I can almost, list out the issues that buyers predominantly make at that stage of the process, which kills the deal for them, why they fall over at that step, whether it be in the find at the start or whether it be in the transact at the end. There's some really common mistakes over my 28 years in the industry that people just consistently make. And our clients at Hello House are making those mistakes before they get to us, before we've got a chance to iron them out. So we definitely want people to get buyer ready, get educated at an earlier stage, and get involved and reach out for professional help at a much earlier start, a much earlier process as you start, because it's going to lessen these mistakes that are made, hopefully eradicate them altogether if you're dealing with us, and it will seriously reduce your time on market. And it means not having to miss out on a dream property. It means landing that ideal investment property or your perfect home first up. There shouldn't be a reason, unless someone overpays more than where you see value, there shouldn't be a reason why you lose.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so just before we jump in and sort of talk about these key 10 issues and how to overcome them, or at least give you some insight on how to overcome them.
And I had to stop at 10, sorry, because I was going to run out of ink on my keyboard. It was a lot more than 10.
Otherwise, we'd be here for hours.
Yeah.
I want you to think about being buyer ready as it's like baking a cake. You know, if you want to sort of produce that perfect outcome, you can't have 3 of the ingredients and not the 4th, right? You can't be intimate with some of the process and not all of the process.
How intimate are you with cake baking?
Very, very poorly.
Are you? That's a good answer.
Very poorly. Yes, baking is not my
forte.
Yeah, not my forte. So we want you to think about it like that. You have to have, like, you've got to be skilled all the way through the process, yeah, because any part of it is going to let you down. Okay, and then just, I think the last thing that I wanted to talk about was that, you know, the reality is, out of the statistics we found, and, you know, we talk about this all the time, that less than 3% of the Australian buying population are using buyer's agents, and what that means then is 97% are going it alone. And so it's the mere fact of going it alone without education and experts that is causing these issues.
Yep,
All
absolutely.
Right, so let's dive in.
Should we jump into these 10?
Yeah, so, mate, I'm going to rapid fire.
Rapid fire, sure.
Maybe rapid fire. So, number 1, shopping without conditional approved finance.
Next. Yeah, no, let's jump into that one really quickly. It's fresh in my mind because I just lost a deal 5 minutes before we jumped onto this call with a client of mine who we know, love and trust. But she's got no conditional finance approval, and she's probably 10 days away from having that. We got into a situation where we're making offers subject to finance. We got into a contract race between 2 parties. We've done tons of work, and there's a lot of stress involved in that for her, only for her to get to the last hurdle and then say, do you know what, this is all too stressful, I'm pulling out. And we said that to her up front, there's no point competing in properties unless you're finance ready. So that is the last example of one of our clients, and it was less than 10 minutes ago. And it is just so rife, and that's why I put it as the top one. Like, if you're not capable of concluding the deal, of wrapping it up, and you haven't got that finance there, then you don't truly know what you can afford.
Yeah.
Yep. You are looking potentially at the wrong properties, and we'll get into this further as you go along. And when you're put under the blowtorch to act, you can't. And so it's highly stressful when you're in that situation if you don't know what money you've got to play with, or if you can even fund the deal at all. So I think first and foremost, get yourself finance ready. Make sure you've got a conditional finance approval in place, unless you're buying cash, of course, and make that your number one thing you do before you start to set the parameters of what's going to come after that.
Perfect. So a couple of things to think about here. If you're tuned into this and you're getting this message about finance ready, it's obviously, you know, for most people, it's the first thing that they think about. It's like, I want to buy a property. What's the very first thing I need to do? Get finance ready. And hence the reason why we called Get Buyer Ready, because they're one and the same. They go hand in hand. I think there's going to become a time in Australia where being buyer ready means that you've got finance and you're also skilled. Like, they're like literally
educated.
It's education. It's one and the same.
And they should be done at the same time, because the leading brokers in Australia are telling us that it takes up to 30 days to get someone conditionally approved. So that's the whole process of collating all the information before they put an application together to a lender and they get back a conditional approval in writing. So in that time, can you find 3.5 hours to do the Get Buyer Ready course to get educated and start to use that time to plan ahead to make sure that the next steps that we're going to talk about don't happen to you? So very easy thing to do is to get buyer ready while you're getting finance ready.
And if you're working with a finance broker at the moment and you're putting all of your documentation together to get your loan packaged and lodged, this is the perfect time to get buyer ready. And so if you're working with the broker and they haven't heard of Hello House, you should reach back out to them and say, hey, Hello House have a course called Get Buyer Ready. If you contact them, you may be able to get it for me complimentary. Yeah. And so we work with a lot of Australia's best mortgage brokers that are now tuning in, and they've got this sort of, they're going through, I call it a paradigm shift. You didn't like it when I said that, did you?
I just didn't really understand what it means, but yeah.
Big brain. That's why I get the big dollars. So they're going through a change in understanding and realising that to transform their clients' behaviour and reducing their days on market, they've got to get them buyer ready while they're getting them conditionally approved.
Absolutely.
So reach back out to your finance broker, tell them to get in contact with Hello House, and we'll be able to help you out.
Cool.
Next one.
Number 2.
Mate, failing to plan is planning to fail. Mate, everyone's heard that, right? And so what we're talking about here is buyers who start out with no set plan, and they're really approaching buying their dream home or investment like a scattergun approach. And scattergun is not going to get you what you want.
No, and it's one of the key reasons that the stat that we referred to at the start of it takes 7 months to transact is because they fail to plan. So I have so many clients over the years that have been starting out in one particular suburb or region, and then they end up buying a completely different area, and they wonder why that happened.
Yeah.
It's because they don't understand the prices, they don't understand the transport links, they don't understand the local community and the lifestyle that's on offer there. So they start with a perception of one area, and they haven't researched it properly and end up in a completely different location, and a lot of that is driven by price. They just get priced out of a market, and that's what leads to this long delay. So really, it's important to start with a plan. Even more important to start with a plan if you're looking to build an investment portfolio. So Sam would be a good one to talk about this on another chat that we do, because he's our investment strategy specialist, but he goes to great lengths to talk to clients about setting themselves up correctly at the start. So, we talk, at length over the years at Hello House about property being a game of loans. So it's about setting yourself up financially right so that you can add and build your portfolio over time. So the best property investors play that game of loans very smartly.
Yep.
And it's about understanding which assets at the right time. And you can only do that if you really have a strong plan to start with. So it's important, if you're looking at investing, to really think through your end goals or even your medium-term goals before you get started.
Yeah, and mate, can I add something? Because I've done
Depends
the
if it's
course,
good.
so I learned something.
Yeah.
Whenever you've got a scattergun approach, you can't build deep, sort of patch knowledge. It's like
Absolutely.
Like it's think about what agents do: know the patch, know the patch, know the patch, and that's why they specialise within an area.
And even market themselves as a local area specialist.
Yeah, and so if you can get laser focused on the area that you want to buy in, and then only be looking at the assets that meet your criteria within that area, then you're going to become a local market expert like the real estate agent that you're going to be coming up against. And so scattergun is not going to get you there.
Yeah, and it's little things like if you're going to, say you're renting, for example, because this is an example that comes up a lot. Young couple or single person currently renting, looking to buy their first home. They're going to have to move out of the area that they're renting in. So they know they're not going to be in the inner city in Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane or whatever. They're going to have to go out to sort of a suburban area to get more space and to get what they want for their budget. So they might just pick one place that looks like it's the right fit, or they've got friends and family nearby, but they have no idea the transport links, for example, or the shopping that's there, or access to beaches or parks or whatever it is that's important to you from a lifestyle perspective. So do that research before you start. Take that time, that 30 days, go and drive the location. Go and look through the suburbs yourself. You don't even have to look at the houses at that point, but get a feel for different locations and work out where it's going to be feasible for you to live, that's going to match what you want in terms of your quality of life, and then dive into property values and what you can afford.
Awesome. Okay, so number 3 sort of dovetails into somewhat of what we've just talked about. And I would sum this up by saying consistency. You absolutely have to be consistent. You can't be sporadic at, I'm looking to buy a property this week but not next week, and so number 3 is sort of taking a part-time approach to, buying that dream home or investment.
Yeah, well, I coach my clients and have always done so that it's a 4 to 8 week full-time commitment. And by full-time, I mean absolutely trawling through the market and watching every listing, physically inspecting 50 plus properties if you can before you pull the trigger and start making offers. Because if you do that, you've got a really good underlying understanding of market value and real-time buyer depth that you're competing against. So it's only going to be 4 to 8 weeks. That is if of course, you're seeing enough stock or listings coming through. In certain regional areas, it may be harder than that because there's not as many opportunities. If you're buying, a farm or a development site or something like that, it's not going to be as often. But for the general market buyer in most of the big cities or regional cities, the stock comes through at a reasonable pace. If you can commit 4 to 8 weeks, you'll get a really good grounding of what's happening in that marketplace.
Yep.
And to your point, in terms of consistency, we used to always have things like buyers would say to me, I'd ring them and say, hey, we've got a property for you to see. It looks like it ticks all your boxes. And they'd say, oh, well, I've got school sport this weekend, or we're going to go away for the weekend. I'd say, okay, great. Well, then you didn't get an opportunity to that. Well, guess what? Next time I've got a listing that's just for them, I'm probably not going to have them on speed dial because they're not committed to getting there to buy.
Yeah.
Now, it's just a very generalized comment, but it's basically the agents are dealing with hundreds of buyers. So if you want to get those leads and those opportunities off market or pre-market, you've got to be ready to jump really fast when those opportunities present.
Yep, perfect. Okay, so number 4, looking at properties that are not in your price range. So this is, I suppose, a lot about you just, being real with yourself and understanding what your top end budget is and making sure that you're finance ready to that top end budget. And don't waste time looking at things that are just outside of that.
Yeah, and it's a lot to do with aspirational buyers.
Yeah.
They're looking at homes that on paper look beautiful and they'd really love to live in that street or that location. And because of agent bait advertising and price positioning and underquoting, they get suckered into these fights of looking at properties that are nowhere near their price budget and also spending money and time, but money's the worst bit there.
Yep.
Building and pest reports, contract reviews, and just physically your own time and what value that cost is. Looking at properties that you've got no chance to buy. So this is a constant one that keeps coming up that people don't do. You said dovetail in terms of these all leading into each other. That's a great term because it is like if you fail to plan, you take a part-time approach, you don't understand how to analyze property, then you start looking at properties that are not in the right price range and it just blows out the time and the money and the hours that you spend on looking for a home.
Yep, awesome. Okay, so number 5, no skills to find properties pre and off market, which means you're literally lining up to, compete with emotional end buyers.
This is a really interesting one. Whenever I talk to people with this type of terminology, and I call it paying retail, okay? So you're competing against emotional end users. You would have to avoid that at all costs if you want to buy smarter, but people just don't get it. The penny just doesn't drop until they've been through this process many times. So you've got to get smart about this. The reality is if you're waiting for listings to come onto Real Estate and Domain, so are 200 other people in your local area. So you're going to compete not only with the agent's database who have probably already seen the property and had a fair shot at it before 200 more people saw it, but then you're going to join the queue. And the problem with joining the queue is you're competing against people that get emotionally invested and they may have more money from you. So you've got no control over the process. But worse still, from an agent's perspective, as soon as they create competition against you, they've got no motivation to sell it fast. So that's when they drag it out and keep introducing more and more people, get you emotionally invested, and then you start to get that FOMO. And they play that off against other buyers, and that's how they get their emotional premium out of people. So you've got to get smarter. You've got to find these properties pre and off market, which means building rapport with real estate agents locally. And that comes down to the points we've discussed. Get laser focused in your target market, because then you only have to deal with, say, 30 or 40 real estate agents. Make sure they're all collated onto your BCC email list or your shopping list. Stay in top of mind with those agents. Stay constantly in contact with them every single week, and you'll be able to jump that queue and you'll see up to 40% more listings than any other buyer.
Yeah, so obviously the Get Buyer Ready course addresses all of this in detail.
It teaches you how to do this at no cost.
Yeah, so we've exactly. So again, if you tuned into this either live or you're watching the replay, we really wanted to give something back to our community, and so we've made the find section of the Get Buyer Ready course complimentary. So there's absolutely no reason whatsoever that you aren't upskilling and retooling yourself with the strategies that we teach in the find section of Get Buyer Ready. Man, it's complimentary, it's free.
Yeah, go get it. Get it. Skill up.
Cool. Okay, so, mate, this is a big one. Lack the skills to effectively analyze property value and be able to do it really fast.
Yeah. You've got to be able to do it on the run.
Yeah.
And you can't deliberate over these things because these opportunities sometimes only open for a tiny window, and you've got to jump in there, and speed is paramount to buying success in any market.
Yeah.
Because if you like it, you can be sure there's someone else that likes it, especially if you're, as we just said, competing against 200 other people locally that are watching it on real estate or domain. So how do you analyze property effectively and fast? Well, you've got to understand the market. So you've got to be watching real-time auctions to see what people are paying today. You've got to be calling agents that have got properties listed for sale, but they're marked as under offer. They're the most recent sales in the marketplace. So get on the phone to those agents, ask them what those properties are sold, because they may have sold yesterday or a fortnight ago. That's going to be the most relevant up-to-date data. There's no point really going back much more than 3 or 4 months because it skews the view of where the current market sits.
Yep.
You can do other things as well. You could employ a valuer to do an independent valuation for you. You could call other agents that are competing in the local area and ask their opinion as well, so you can get a guide. Often doing that is a good cheat sheet for me because they'll tell me, actually, we've already had a buyer go through there and they offered X and they knocked it back. So we know they want, more than such and such a price.
Yep.
And the agent that's got the listing will never tell you that, but a competing agent will know that information because they're really dialed in, as you said, as the local area specialist, and they know what's happening in their hood. So got to be able to move on it fast. We've got access to RP Data Professional and other tools, but for years, once I've really honed in my knowledge in a certain area, I'm able to effectively analyze properties, really just watching the market in the flesh, like physically inspecting properties and using realestate.com or domain. So that's the buy side and the sold side.
Cool. But the smarter way, get us to do it for you.
Well, we've got an in-house valuer here. All he does is analyse property all day, so we're very accurate on the analysis.
Yeah, our chief analyst is ex-bank valuer from the private sector. Head analyst for a property investment company, buying property for investors all over the nation. So, honestly, the smarter way, get us to do it because we'll do it quickly, efficiently, and more importantly, accurately.
And it's about reaching out to local agents and spending a fair bit of time understanding where they position the property, where they think they would sell it, or where the market value may take it. It's looking at comparable sales data, and it's also weighing up the flow of listings that come to market to determine how hard you have to make, how hard you go at making an offer or not, and understanding how much stock is on there currently that's competing against it and where that's going to sit as well. So the analysis is quite deep.
Yep. Awesome. Okay, mate, now moving on to number 7, unaware of the buying process. And, this is the real key for me. The speed required to navigate other buyer competition. And so, mate, can you just, you have to explain this to people because you have to move fast. It's sort of almost counterintuitive. It's a bit like people are thinking they've got time. But the quicker that you can be in there and sort of undercut your buyer competition and create an opportunity for you to negotiate prior to auction or prior to the next open for inspection or the first open for inspection, a lot of people get this wrong, don't they? They're like,
it's a huge one.
It's open for inspection on Saturday. I'll just wait. I'll go to that open and...
Well, that suits me because I'm busy at work. I can't get there all week. I've got netball on Saturday and I'll be able to get there Saturday afternoon and we'll see. But the problem is 15 other people went through during the week that have got more urgency than you. And when you get there on Saturday, 35 people turn up on Saturday and there's another 6 contracts out and there's a whole heap more interest in it. And all of a sudden the agent doesn't want to sell it to you because they've got tons of interest they're building up to compete against you. So speed is paramount to buying success, as I always say. But speed is not rushing. So you've got to be educated in the buying process. That's understanding how to find these properties, how to analyze these properties, and then what are the next steps when you've found it and you've understood the value. And it's doing your due diligence. So if you're buying an apartment, it's doing a strata inspection report. If it's buying a house, it's doing a building and pest inspection. It's getting the contract reviewed by a competent solicitor or conveyancer that you trust. And it's doing all those things fast. One of the biggest complaints that I hear all the time is about brokers and conveyancers, and it's from buyers saying, well, I can't get the contract read for 4 days or 3 or 4 days, or my mortgage broker can't see me for 3 days to book an appointment. If that's what you're hearing from your broker or conveyancer, fire them. Find someone else who can do it better, because you have to have the view that you are buying and it is absolutely urgent It's absolutely urgent. Now, as I say, it's not rushing, but it's understanding that you need to move quickly because you're buying a house or an apartment. These opportunities don't just replicate themselves really easily. So if it's taking you a month or 2 months to find that opportunity, why would you let the door stay open for someone else to jam their foot in it and show interest in a home and potentially outbid you or beat you with speed to wrap up a deal? So got to understand how the buying process works, all the steps of it, and then you've got to be able to move like grease lightning to make sure it happens.
Yeah, you just have to be, practical and realistic about it. Like, just think about whatever your buyer requirements are. So think about your ideal shopping list and that ideal property that you're looking for. And so let's say you're a family. You can't believe for a minute that you're the only family shopping for the same or similar ideal property in your target area. So it's the person with more sense of urgency to act that's going to be in there and, to steal that dream property.
There's two things I think we should talk about here. One is confidence, okay? That is the biggest thing lacking from the majority of inexperienced or first home buyers. So they lack the confidence to know what's going to happen next. And they don't have that real conviction to act or take that next step with confidence. So that is a really big thing, that having a professional on your hand who knows what's going to come next, knows what needs to happen for you to keep that ball rolling and steamroll down the hill so you can get the deal. So confidence is a really big thing. And the other thing about timing is so many buyers will call us and say, I've seen something, but the first open's not till Saturday, which we addressed. What you've got to do...
One of those today.
Yeah, we have one of those today. There you go. It's every day, basically. What I want to do is I want to almost to these people to say, come on, you've got to wake up, shake up, and get energized about this. If there's a listing that comes on that suits your criteria, get on the phone to the agent, come up with some reason why you won't be there on Saturday when they want you to be there, because that suits their narrative, and tell them you need to see it today or tomorrow or before school on Wednesday. Whatever it is, just make time to get there first. If you get there first, you get the jump on other buyers. It's really key.
Yeah, I was explaining to a potential client that I was having a discovery call today that notwithstanding the fact that they believe this property meets their criteria and the open for inspection is Saturday, like right now is the time to act. So think of it like this. Our dialogue as a expert with a selling agent is different to just an everyday property buyer, right? So there's this unspoken professional courtesy that plays out. And so when we speak to a selling agent about a target property in advance of an open for inspection, they're possibly going to extend more professional courtesy to us to get our client in before the open than you just calling up as average Joe buyer and saying, can I see the property early? But Scott's saying still try, but this is one of the advantages of having an expert on your side, I think.
It's all about the right way you say things and how you position it. So the way that I would do that potentially, and there's multiple ways of skinning this cat, but the way that I potentially do that is ring the agent and say, hey, Mrs. Agent, we're already under offer on X property down the road. We're very close to exchanging contracts on that. My client has seen this property that you've got at 12 Smith Street that looks like it ticks all the boxes and potentially would be a better fit for their needs than the other home. The problem is there's time pressure. It's not us, it's them, it's the other seller that's putting that time pressure on us. Yep. We really want to see this property. We're available in the next hour or two. When can you get us in there as quickly as possible so we can make a key buying decision, because we're ready to pull the trigger on a purchase today? Yeah. All of a sudden, that's changed. That's rather than, can I come in and see it before Saturday? No, join the queue.
Yeah.
There's got to be a script around it. There's got to be dialogue around it that's well thought through and driven. If you want to get a result, you've got to pull that trigger and drive that action yourself.
Well, I think it also comes back to what you said, just having the confidence to make that call to the agent and speak with that level of professional conviction.
Yeah, a big part of this that we'll unpack over the next few weeks is how this relates to buying pre-auction. Because it's part of the auction coaching for agents to say, we don't want your offer today, but thank you for your interest. We'll see you in 3 weeks' time or 2 weeks' time, whatever it might be, because my seller is very committed to the auction process. What you're being told there is, thanks very much for your offer. It's not enough. and we'd actually prefer to put on a really big theatrical show in the street and see hundreds of people to make me look really good, and we're going to put you under an absolute blowtorch to pay an emotional premium while you compete against lots of other people. See you in a couple of weeks. Yeah. Thanks for your interest. Yeah. So you've got to change that, and back to the dialogue that I just used, you've got to come up with a way to crowbar your, into that situation. So I'm not going to pay retail with everybody else. I'm going to control this process. And I mean, you had this with a client a couple of weeks ago that said, I'm not sure what value you professional agents or professional negotiators can add in this process, because the agents told me it's got to go to auction in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time. And we had to give him a long spiel around exactly this, and he turns up at the auction 3 weeks later, doesn't want our professional help, and lost. So back on the hunt. And it's like, if you don't get it, like we're making this really simple, that this is all part of a game. It's a puzzle. You fit into that puzzle nicely at the agent's discretion, and you've got to change that. Otherwise, you're just going to be a buyer sheep.
Yeah, well, that's it. The Get Buy Ready course is really like the rules to the game. It's teaching you the game that you're about to play, and then how to prepare yourself to combat that.
Yeah, and there is a march, like everyone that's competing at this and winning is playing by a different set of rules than what the general public thinks.
Yeah.
We just operate, and so does any other professional person if they're any good at it, at a completely different level in terms of, the how we word things, how we action things to get things done on our time frame, how we move with speed and confidence through all those processes.
Yeah.
So if you can't do that and you're not prepared to learn, and you don't want to take that risk, because it's the biggest financial asset of your life that you're purchasing most likely, that's when you put your hand up and say, hey, I understand the risks that are involved. I understand this is not a beginner's game. This is a professional's game, and you operate at a different level. I need help.
Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect. All right, moving on to number 8. So knowing the key values in making unconditional and conditional offers, and how to ask the right questions to create attractive offers. So, geez, that was a mouthful. I'm glad I had the script.
Yeah, exactly. Well, asking the right questions to create the ultimate offer is reasonably simple. You want to get to the very heart of why the property seller is trading. Okay, so you want to ask questions about what their ideal settlement is. Would they accept a smaller deposit than 10%, say a 5% deposit, or something else if you've got any other reasons otherwise? Potentially, why are they selling? You want to know and build a little case study in each time you're looking to negotiate around what the ideal circumstances are for the seller, because once you've done your research and your analysis on the value of it, you want to address all of those key points that the seller wants to make your offer as condition free as possible and as attractive as possible, so that if they've got 2 offers that are at a similar price, they'll take your offer because it ticks all their boxes.
Yeah.
So that's as simple as really understanding how to ask the right questions. And again, in the course, we go through all those questions. We talk about that in depth. And if anyone ever needs a script around that with the right questions, just reach out to us anytime. I'm happy to share that. But the unconditional versus conditional is something that is lost on most buyers as well. They're almost trained buyers to think, well, if I'm allowed to have a finance clause in certain states in Australia, or I'm allowed to have a building and pest clause, why wouldn't I just do that? Because it gives me an instant out if there's any problems with my finance or the property. That's all well and good to think like that, but I can tell you from the agent's side and the seller side that if you're going to stack your offer with conditions, it becomes negative. Okay,
take it, put it at the bottom of the pile.
Yeah. And when the market was booming, so this time last year, for example, in Queensland, for example, we had a property where I think we won it, and there was 52 written contract offers on the same day for the same property. 52 offers on contract, and the agent rang me and said, well, it was between you and one other buyer, because 50 of them were conditional on finance or building and pest, so they went straight in the bin, and it was just between you and another, and you guys won because you had the best terms. The prices were basically identical, you had the best terms. So it's not rocket science. It's really easy to understand how you can make your offer as clean as possible. So if you can do a building and pest inspection up front, do it, because then you'll know when you go to make an offer, warts and all, what's wrong with the property. You can get an understanding of what it's going to cost to do any rectification works if that's needed.
Yep.
And you go into it with your eyes wide open, and you get rid of the building clause, which is a potential out and a negative for the seller. Same with the finance clause. If you've got conditional finance, which we spoke to as the number one thing you should have before you start, why do you need a finance clause? Because if you do the other steps and understand market value, market depth, and how to analyse property, you're going to be buying it below market value. So then there's no risk that your valuation is going to come back lower from the bank. So you don't need a finance clause either. And if you can remove those two things and make an unconditional offer, your offer is so much stronger than a conditional offer. And that means you're going to save money. And sometimes it can be tens of thousands. And I've been in situations over 28 years where it's been hundreds of thousands better off because it was unconditional. And the owner is looking for a clean, confirmed sale on the day rather than waiting 7, 14, 21 days on certain conditions that you may make the contract subject to. Really important.
That's a key one. It also,
they all are, aren't they? They all kind of feed into each other.
Again, it's all, you can see how the compounding effect on each and every one of these. Because even what you've just talked about then requires a degree of confidence in what you're doing. Like having the confidence to commit and back yourself and go get the report. We need the report also. We want the report because if there's anything that shows up in the report, we're going to use those in the negotiation to drive the price down.
Totally.
And so you understand potentially what, if any, exposure you've got.
Yeah, one other really quick thing on this as well is a lot of property spruikers suggest that you get the property under offer as quickly as possible and you use it subject to building and pest, so you make it a conditional offer, and then you use that period, whether it be 5 days or 7 days, to get the building and pest report and then renegotiate terms and potentially 5,000, 10,000, whatever damage you can get that's from the building and pest. I can tell you though, from an agent's perspective, having sat in that seat, once a buyer is emotionally connected to a property, and I don't care what anyone says, if they're an investor, buyers will say to me, I'm an investor, I'm not emotional. I'd say that's absolute bullshit.
We call bullshit.
If you're looking at it, if you're looking for property for weeks or months and you're spending considerable time and money to find a property, you are invested. No matter you think you're emotional about it or not, you're invested in that process. Once you're invested and then you go to a conditional exchange, you're basically locked in. Now, yes, you've got an out if you can't agree terms in terms of how much discount you get from the seller if there's anything wrong with the building and pest, but the agents know that you're seriously invested in the process, and I would play much harder negotiation tactics against you, and I would be less inclined to give you a bigger discount because I know that you're already invested in the process. And I've seen this played out over 3,000 property deals. It's absolutely the wrong way to buy property, is to do a building and pest and expect to negotiate later. You're in a much better position if you highlight all those things up front and then use that to build a negotiation strategy around to get the right price first up.
Yeah. So in summary, we call bullshit on that strategy.
Yeah. True.
Is that what we call?
Yeah.
We do. Okay, and so now, limited or no experience buying property and woefully underprepared for the agent games and negotiation strategies that are going to be used against you.
We talk about the cost of outsourcing this to a professional. So, we quantified those statistics in the last couple of months in terms of the 7 months to transact, 90 hours of your time and missing 5 times and all the report costs and things and money that you're going to spend there. And we quantified that you probably, the average buyer in Australia is probably paying $100,000 too much. And that's because our average saving below the target price equals X, which is a big portion of that. And then all those other added costs that we've quantified from those stats. So if you're not willing to spend a small amount of money to make sure you've got the best possible chance to save yourself that emotional premium and that luxury tax that you don't need to pay and shouldn't be paying, and you've got no experience, then what do we talk about? You've either one or two things.
We don't mean to upset anyone.
Yeah, this makes people upset.
But you're either ignorant or arrogant.
Yeah,
it's like, it's just human nature. Your ego gets in the way, and you go, I sell cars for a living. I can out-negotiate a real estate agent. Bullshit. You can't, because these guys are selling real estate day in, day out. They're trained experts. They train on scripts and dialogues. They know exactly how to work the process, the buying process, to create buyer competition, either real or perceived.
And the other thing that...
Mate, how often have you seen people negotiate against themselves?
Every weekend at every auction, basically.
They're in a one-horse race.
Yep. It's just a constant thing we had another client this week who has done the course, the Get Buyer Ready course, and wanted to go it alone. He's a really well-educated property guy who's very interested in the art of it, and a lovely guy, and hopefully will work with us in the future. But unfortunately, he went it alone on Friday last week. And lost a property in Sydney because he got outbluffed by the agent. So this is what, in his words, were, I made an offer. It was my best and final offer. I conveyed that to the agent. The agent said to me, it's not enough. I've got another purchaser and I'm going to give you an opportunity to make your best and final. He said, no, I think this guy's just bluffing me. So I'm going to stick at my price. And he lost because the agent was telling the truth.
Yeah.
So you no matter how switched on and smart you think you are in this situation, unless you know the agent games and how they play them, it's really difficult to coach people around those situations. And that's another dream property gone that he's going to have to go back to the drawing board and start again.
Yeah.
And that could have been avoided because in that situation we would have known why the agent was saying that to us. There's certain questions that I would have asked to get more information out of him to give me confidence around that being legit, and then we would have had an opportunity to get involved and make a higher offer if we wanted to. Otherwise, we could have walked away confidently. But if we walked away, it wouldn't have been a lost opportunity. It would have been, no, we've paid enough. Beyond that, we don't see value at that level, and we're happy to pass.
Yeah.
Very different outcome to missing it because you got outbluffed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it brings us to number 10, which is, not seeking professional help. And this is really probably the number one thing. We talk about, it's the 21st century, for God's sake. Like, gone are the days where everyday, average property buyers need to go it alone without expert help on their side. It just doesn't make sense. We sort of live in a culture in Australia where we start to outsource everything now. Like I know people that will outsource getting someone in to organise their house, declutter and organise things and make things more efficient. And here we have everyday people making life's largest purchase of a home or an investment property. I don't know,
and rolling the dice. They can have a crack at it
thinking
themselves.
They can have a crack.
Yeah, and the point, we don't have to labour on this too much because we've spoken about how much value an expert can add through this process. But a key point is if you're not prepared to get educated and the rest of it, you need to stick your hand up and get that level of support around you because it's a very low cost in the grand scheme of things, and it just takes away that risk.
Yeah. And
risk is such a big thing in property as well because you end up buying the wrong property or you end up overpaying for it, and you're going to be paying for it every day for the next 30 years. And there's cost savings in lower stamp duty, lower interest costs over time is double typically the saving that you make. So if we can save you $50,000 below your target price over the course of a standard loan, that typically ends up at circa $100,000 saving.
Yeah.
So it's not insignificant.
Yeah, the other thing too, a few weeks back last week, we talked about asset selection. And I think we made the point that, if you think you're buying the right property and it ends up being the wrong property, just a 1% return on investment can end up costing you
$177,000.
$177,000.
Yeah.
And so it's not just about, thinking, well, I'm just buying a home, I'll go have a crack at it. Because even if you're buying your home, it may not be your forever home. It might be a home. I spoke to a client today that their principal place of residence is about to convert into an investment property, and they're now actually going to buy another principal place of residence. And so wouldn't it be nice to think that you come into the transaction buying your principal place of residence and it's actually a good asset, you're not buying a money pit.
Yeah.
And also, if your life circumstance changes, you can convert it to an investment property, and it's going to give you everything that you want over that life cycle.
Yeah. And one little thing to leave, which is a bit of a negative, but it's just something that everyone should be aware of, and we've talked about it a lot already, is that great agents and even good agents train to make you feel like you had a win, that the process was a win-win. So all these people that go it alone and say, I saved 20 grand, or it was an easy process, the agent was lovely, got on really well with them, they are often, very often, because the stats prove it, getting absolutely fleeced on the transaction and overpaying, and they'll never know it because agents train daily or weekly to make you feel good as a purchaser that you got a good deal or a fair deal. So go into this knowing that if you're going to go it alone, that's the likely outcome. You'll get made to feel like you had a really good process. It was nice and straightforward, but meantime, you've possibly overpaid by 50 or 100 grand.
Yeah.
That's just the commercial reality of it.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yep.
Okay, well, I think we nailed it, mate.
Oh, hopefully there's some good value for people. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, so in closing out the call, if you've watched this right through to the end, if you were tuned into the recording, just put hashtag recording, just so we know, where you tuned in. And if you've got any questions that are coming up over either the course, or if you're currently thinking about buying a property, no matter what stage you're at in the buying process, reach out to us. Our discovery calls, our strategy sessions are complimentary, and we'd love the opportunity to talk to you about your property goals and how we can play a role in achieving them.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Bye for now.
Bye.